Cheap advice is probably the most expensive shit you can waste money on ever in the universe. And they talk about the expense of bad advice. It really struck a chord with me for lots of different reasons. There's a fair amount of depth to it. So in this context, I think they were talking about education and the cost of bad education. Cheap advice is probably the most expensive shit you can waste money on ever in the universe. Because not only do you pay for it up front, then you pay for it in the long run in two ways. Number one, if they give you bad advice, you've just wasted a bunch of money on what they said to spend money on. But it's time. You just spent 2 years going down a path that didn't make any sense whatsoever. Boy, oh boy, to get that time back. Let me grab something here real fast. This is a scary one. But here's why, just to bring home the idea of bad advice being so unbelievably expensive, and even in good times. Here, we're recovering from the financial crisis of '08, the housing bubble. Right here, right? Trump loses. Britain says, I don't want to have anything to do with that crappy euro currency. But that yellow dot represents COVID. Now, this graph was put together before COVID happened, because there is always, give or take about 7 years after recovery begins, a mid-cycle slowdown. Then there's looser monetary or fiscal policy. They're giving away money. Sound familiar? Then there's a commodities boom. I think we've talked about that one. Huge infrastructure spending. Boy, if I go back into my memory bank, late last year, early this year, Biden signs a $1.2 trillion infrastructure package. Okay, good. So we're right on target, right? We're about to enter an era of very easy money. Money is free flowing. There's volatility in our market. But we're just about to get into that, which means there are a shit ton of people who are doing business that don't need to be. As soon as the next time you hear that the world's tallest building is announced, and or the CEO of a major real estate developer says, okay, real estate has stabilized and prices are never going to go down again. We're past it. Watch, just man, grab every single penny you can. So according to our handy dandy graph here, late 25, early 26. The key there is that the vast majority of their wealth is tied up in things like a 401k. And 401k is tied directly to the stock IRA, Roth IRA, right? Those are all tied to equities, right? The stock market. And here's something that's really scary. In 1995, before the stock market crashed in 98 or 99, depending on when you want to call it, publicly traded companies, healthy publicly traded companies, were trading at give or take about 3 to 5x their EBITDA, right? Earnings before taxes, amortization, depreciation, and interest, right? So how much did you make before you start adding or subtracting all the special shit, right? What's your revenue minus your expenses? EBITDA is actually a really good number to know financially because a lot of other items are powered off of EBITDA. But 3 to 5 times earnings was the volume at which stock for that company traded. So if you were a $5 billion earnings company, you would generally trade at 15 to 25 billion in stock. So if each share was worth $50, you guys can do the math and away we go, right? That's how many shares there are available for everybody to own. Since the explosion of IRAs and 401ks, which give or take happened in the late 80s, early 90s, because of the death of, ready for this word, the pension. Nobody wanted to be responsible for taking care of their employees long term anymore. You guys just take it. Oh, and by the way, we'll match your 6%, half a cent on the dollar. Whatever. When that happened, everybody saw an amazing boom in the stock market. And that's what led to the first crash in 99. Everybody was overvalued. Well, here's the kicker. The dumbasses didn't learn. Nobody did. And here's what I mean by that. Today, large companies like Google or their parent company, Alphabet, they don't trade volume and value based on 3 to 5 times EBITDA. Those large companies are trading at 19 to 25 times their earnings. So take into account that somewhere between 14 and 17% of trading volume on a regular basis is tied to companies that own real estate. And now you got a double whammy. There are tons of publicly traded companies out there that all they do is they read Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad book and turn it into a business. They buy houses, they do the minimum to them, they rent them out, they've got positive cash flow, and people say, oh my God, you're a profitable company. Well, no, they're not. The only way they're going to get their money back out is if they sell the house. They didn't actually read the book because the book says your house is not an asset. Anyways, this graph that you're looking at is somewhere between 18 and 21 years. They call it a 20.6 year cycle, economic housing price cycle. And it dates all the way back to just after the Civil War. Every 21 years, this sumbitch follows the same pattern. It's only been interrupted twice. World War I, World War II. Here's where the rubber meets the road. Bring the entire conversation full circle, right? If I'm putting my faith and my trust and getting advice from the wrong people today, by the time I realized, holy shit, I am so far down the wrong road. It doesn't matter how far down the wrong road you go, there's always an opportunity to turn around unless they shoot you dead. Sorry about that, right? But 2 years from now puts us in late 2025. There's a lot of people out there who strongly believe, very strongly believe, that the success or failure of an entrepreneur has just as much to do with when they start their business as it does all of the other variables. If I'm starting a business right now and I've got a 2-year runway to get my head out of my butt, and I decide, you know what, I'm going to trust those guys from company X. I have to be very careful about the people that I work with and get advice from and take advice from. And from the same token, the people I give advice to. Because my time, I know what my time is worth. I know what my brain power is worth. And when I advise my clients, I'm telling them, you got to throw down as much cash in the next 24 months as you can. And that's already going to be hard because the market's not looking so hot, right? There's a lot of volatility there. Of course, just like anything else, there's opportunity here, there's opportunity there. It's usually where people aren't looking. What I'm getting at is that not only is bad advice expensive now, it's also expensive later.